Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast number 282. This edition of Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by Randall Riley. I have a guest with me today, and his name is Randy Ty. Randy, how you doing, man?
Not too bad at all. Thank you very much.
Randy is the product specialist for RNHQ, and he obviously works for Randall Riley, or wouldn't be on here since they're sponsored by. This is a Randall Riley podcast. So, how you been, man? It's been a little bit since I've seen you. It's been about a month or so.
Yeah, no, we had a good visit there at the down at Iowa City. Worked out well, and yeah, we got a lot of things talked about. So no, it's been real good, really good, very busy.
Good deal. Well, Randy has a kind of a unique background. He comes from an equipment dealership background. He's got a lot of stuff there that kind of flow into what we're doing. But the thing about Randy is he's got a few more years on me than I do on him. So, Randy, why don't you talk about your background, how you got to where you're at today?
All right, I will. So thank you. And so my history comes from the farm machinery side, of course, as you said. Actually, my family had a dealership before I was born. I have actually an old black and white picture someplace around here with my dad and my grandfather and his two brothers opening the dealership in 1957. So I've been around a long time. I was born in 59. And so come up through that, like lots of people in our industry and the family dealership, worked at the parts counter, sold parts for David Brown tractors, believe it or not, and was in the dealership all the time. Turned into a salesman. Started my sales career with them at 18, so that's 40 some years ago. And then, like lots of dealerships where I grew up, which was in Southern Ontario, of course, we had the expansions in the late 70s and the early 80s come with a high interest, so they went out of business, and I decided to come west. So I come to Western Canada, where the big iron was, and worked for the New Holland Company store in a couple of locations as a manager and as a salesman, and different roles since then, including managing different dealerships. My last role comes from a 19-store complex, a New Holland complex, where I was a whole goods inventory manager. So certainly seeing a lot of headaches and pains and challenges that lots of different dealers has come from, that's for sure, and I've seen.
Right on. Okay. So in those years that you were doing in the dealership side of it, I mean, just the way that used equipment was viewed from, your first sales job to where you ended at in the dealership, that was such a dramatic way of thinking, and how those things changed. Talk about that a little bit and that progression of how used equipment was looked at over your career.
Well, a lot of things have changed and a lot of things haven't. Certainly our dealership, our family dealership, I remember my dad pulling his hair out on equipment we've had forever because we paid too much. And I've seen dealers these days pay too much for inventory. It's been a common problem. Certainly how we viewed it and what resources we had are way more sophisticated now as long as we use them. There's more opportunities for search of a broader market. There's dealers looking at exporting outside of the country, outside of the continent. And so that way it's certainly changed with the tools to look at it and try to decide. But it's still been a challenging role for any farm machinery dealership these days. That's where everything's won or lost, is on the used equipment.
Yep, absolutely. And that used equipment plays such a vital role in not just necessarily having something else to sell, but it's the machine population that you generate because of that when you sell it back in the aftermarket side of that as well. So, you talked about parts, you talked about service, you talked about all those things there. You've kind of hit every point in the dealership as as your career was progressing along. What was the funnest thing for you? What did you enjoy the most in the dealership?
Well, I have always enjoyed sales, for sure. Parts counter was nice. Always the parts, it's always safe for people to come into you, and if they don't come in the door, you're not that busy. That's always nice. And but the interactions with customers, our industry's always been a relationship one, and so that's been such a plus. So sales has been great. I'm and a lot of fun. I'm always somebody that's enjoyed meeting new people. So I really prided myself in my multiple location starting new careers that I always enjoyed cold calling. So I've always enjoyed selling, meeting people. How do we fix this problem? How do we address this? I did a little bit of time on the ag side of a construction dealership, a couple of cat dealers I worked for with their ag equipment. And seeing how they interact with their customers on the construction side, totally different than the ag side. It's not uncommon that we would be invited in for lunch, as I'm sure you've experienced as well. But a construction guy very seldom would see that because he was dealing with an office as compared to their home. So
Sure.
sales, I guess, and meeting people and understanding their issues has always been something I've really enjoyed.
Yep. That's one thing I like too, is meeting new people and discussing, trying to help them figure out whatever issue they've got in front of them. And that's
Yeah,
always been
exactly.
a fun part of that.
Yeah.
Looking back on your career there, the progression, you saw the multitude of single store and multiple store dealerships. When people say that today, they're talking 12 to 20 more, off back, back in the 70s and 80s, a multiple store dealership was just that. It had two, you know what I mean? So I guess
Yes,
as
exactly.
looking at that progression over your career, what were some of the processes that you saw change, and how did you use what was available to you to overcome some
Yeah.
of that stuff?
The interesting things that I see, I think, with the multiple locations and the range of geographical area,
Hmm.
the last dealership I worked at, we'd be from the one store to the farthest one east, we'd been about 8 hours drive just between the two stores.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yet, of course, their territory went even farther. And then north was probably 6 hours from top to bottom with the
Hmm.
buffer of the area either side of that. And so that's really affected, we've got weather that can be so narrow anymore. It seems like gone are the days that we'd get a 3-day gentle rain that would cover a whole area the size of the state. Now we have a heavy swath go through, and it's
Hmm.
pouring over here, and they can still work over there. And so dealerships need to be able to go kind of all the time, it seems, where
Yeah.
I know we were moving resources from one side of the territory to the other because it was slowing down and needed a service truck over there. And as the combine season, 6-8 hours isn't a real big distance, but sometimes that's a difference in the type of crops they grow too, whether they got enough heat units that for just a certain type of crop in the southern part of where I came from compared to the north, things like that. And so being able to be mobile, get at it, move parts around. Everybody's multiple store. We're trying to kind of minimize our total dollars of parts
Sure.
and return on assets. So let's have more parts, but spread them all over. Well, we need that way to move them from one side of the territory to the other. So mobility and driving 8 hours to deliver a bearing for a combine and
Right.
harvest is
Yeah.
not unusual
Right.
anymore.
Yep.
And before it was, we had parts depots where I grew up. We had a parts depot every 2 hours. I remember making that run, or 2 hours away, but that's all. Now we're a day away just for one of our own stores, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yep. So that's one thing that Randall Riley and Iron Solutions, what you guys are doing over there. You've got a lot of products that kind of not necessarily battle the process of the parts and service and getting those stuff moved around, but the processes within the dealership and how you guys are viewing the used equipment process, and what does that look like. So talk a little bit about, especially what you're a product manager for there, the RNHQ product, and what that
For
is, and how
sure.
are you helping dealers with that kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And so that's what actually, a little bit of background is I've used the Iron HQ product. I want to say like 20 years. I've
Okay.
always been one of these guys that dug into solutions, just like we talked
Hmm.
about earlier. We're trying to find a solution. So I was always one of these guys that was looking for solutions, how we could take this information and catch up with some of the other brands and or the other product lines out there. That coming from the working at a couple of construction dealerships, you sure got to see how they looked at things and how they talked amongst themselves and so on. So certainly, as an example, and there's lots out there, but as an example with the RNHQ product, it gives us visibility amongst dealers, amongst stores, amongst salesmen, and trade-ins coming in. You talk about trades and getting the most dollars for it the quickest is always been a plus. In the old days, maybe you didn't know a trade-in come in at another store till maybe it was sold. Nowadays, we've got that sharing of information where we set up things where we send an email blast as soon as something's sold to every salesman and the team with what the trade-in is. So boom, we've got more people looking at it, because that was always a sore point. I could have sold that. I could have sold that. I had a guy waiting for it, but now they've got that instant communication. So visibility is a big thing. And of course, Iron HQ and Iron Solutions and trade guides. So of course, trade guide, I always used as a reference. But as a reference, we've had different people say, it's not trade gospel, it's trade guides. And so with our system, we're able to do comparisons, both of what we've sold it before and what the guide said it's worth. So like I would do it at my previous store, we did took a single product and a single year, a model number in a single year, and we would put it over a 6-year span and see where we were compared to iron guides. And so that's the kind of the tools that the HQ gives me, is I can do that kind of information. I can gather that out of the system and compare, so I could tell the sales team and give them some coaching on where you should be compared to iron guides. And so that was always a big plus. And that's some of the products that we bring that we didn't have before. We didn't have an easy way to look at what we sold it for, other than ask the team at the office, and everybody had a different opinion and how it looked. And so having those tools, as far as, the salesman, we've been able to praise at mobile. That's huge. Now we're able to do appraisals on a mobile app, have the information back at our manager's hands before we get at the end of the laneway almost, and have that information back, allowing them to do some pricing on it. Look at my numbers. I've always been a big fan and a believer that the salesman shouldn't be involved in the appraisal process as well. I think it goes a long ways for a salesman to have that confidence when he's walking across that parking lot to talk to the customer about that piece of machinery over there, that if he's involved in the process, he's more confident than in that numbers when he gets there, as compared to saying, I don't know, the boss says it's worth $100,000. I don't know. And then, so that doesn't give you much confidence walking across. But if he's been involved in the appraisal process, he knows some tips and what the competitors are out there. Somebody mentions, well, there's one down the street. Yeah, but he knows it's got 3,000 more hours than mine has. And so we want him in the process. So using some of our tools, they have that mobile app, or even if you're at the office, entering it in, putting your numbers in, using sales history right there in your laptop, using what you've appraised them for, being able to search that right there on your laptop, and what the guide is. And then what we would do is we would give them a bit of management on, okay, we want you to be, in certain products, 110% of trade guides, or heavens now, can you imagine what loader tractors are worth now? A 3 to 7 year old 150 horsepower mainline loader tractor these days, that's more like 130% of guides. But having a third party reference, having some places, my father-in-law used to say, here, take the dummy end of the tape measure. So when we were building stuff, I'd take the dummy end of the tape measure, and that's where we'd start. And so I always use the guide as a third party independent reference point that has way more data really than anybody else as far as overall numbers. We're one of the few companies that I know of. We put a human eyes on every appraisal. And so it may be wrong lots of times, but maybe it's consistently wrong for my area, because I also believe that if I couldn't exceed what some people might consider the average on a price of equipment, if I couldn't exceed that, it was my brand and I had done extra work to it and promoted it and built this product line along. If I couldn't exceed average, then maybe I should be doing something else, because we should be better than our neighbors if we're offering updates and reference points and take the trade in, and his is in my shop getting fixed and now I got a replacement. All those things that brings value to the customer. If it's my product in particular, then I should be stronger than, shall we say, a competitive dealer down the road. So like that information, be able to use the third party as an independent instead of just a bellwether to see, well, what do you think this week? I got some real good data. We were able to use that as a predictive model, because I would take that chart and say, okay, to the corporate sales team, where do you think this is going? Is this still remaining strong? We'd be able to forecast on one product where we thought the guide was going. And if we're buying this stuff a year out or more, okay, the guide's going to, traditionally, I think it's going to stay its format, that it drops a certain percentage in the next 12 months. And so we were this percentage compared to guide, so 110%, 150% over guide, but the guide's going to drop. So we'll let the team go at this percentage and know that by the time it gets here, maybe we'll be close based on history. And if the local team, if my corporate sales team and myself at any size dealership doesn't know the most about my region, then there also is something else wrong. I should know what the market is. I should know what market trends are. I remember having different discussions where we had a certain model combine that had come along. Oh, there's a new model, and we could just see that thing falling on its face. Nobody wants that anymore. And so if we don't know that about our product, that is not being taken very well locally, an example, and it will depend on the region, and it's not something that's in trade guide, but one example I like to use is vertical tillage. Everybody was all crazy about vertical tillage and or high-speed tillage, and not a lot of customers knew the difference, but once they got the one they did like, well, then it was hard to sell them. They're big money, locally, where we got to go, if we got to move it out of the region, so much more freight, it's big, heavy piece. So we should know locally what's going on, and then have almost like a grain trader and the local basis on grain, right? There's kind of what the industry says it should be. Now, how can I get it? Is there more users of that product? Is it received well? The dealership I previously worked for, we were very strong in CX combines, and we probably sold more new ones and also more used New Holland CX combines than most of the rest of Western Canada. So we influenced that market the most, but that's because we knew how to promote it, how to sell it, how to talk about it. We got behind it. We liked the whole idea of it. And so we were able to exceed what maybe other dealers in other parts of the territory would get for that product. And so that's what I mean. I've been able to exceed that in knowing our local market. So one, having access to that information, the whole team, and being able to get an opinion where it is. And then, of course, when we can have multiple appraisals, salesman puts his appraisal in, maybe his manager throws an appraisal below it, maybe the inventory guy has a look at it, puts his numbers in. You've kind of got the three joint thing there, and you make a decision and use that appraisal and away you go. So it allows some, shall we say, good conscious decisions and quick response. That's the other thing. We need to get these numbers back to these guys right away. And so that's also the nice thing about being the guide. If all of a sudden he's got to make a decision at 8 o'clock at night to close this deal and he can't get a hold of the inventory manager, who knows? If we give them guides ahead of time, we can't be that far off. If we said be that 110% of the guide or be 170%. So we would publish examples of where they could be for this next quarter compared to the guide to at least start with, give them a running point.
Yep.
And then as we had more diverse equipment, we'd get more people in the opinion on what it was worth.
Right on. Okay. So talk a little bit about from the functionality, excuse me, from the functionality of the actual program itself. You talked about the mobile side of it, and that's a big part of today's business with so many guys spending more time in the field, farmers getting bigger, going out, spending more time on the farm, and having, like you said, travel a lot further to see some of these guys now. Talk about the mobile side of that and how do you get that information in a phone or in a tablet or something like that and
For
get it
sure.
back to your people.
Yeah. So the RNHQ product is based on the platform or format from NetSuite Oracle. So
Okay.
It's a world-class CRM. It's extremely robust in what it can do on the customer relationship management side. And then over the last 15 or 20 years, Iron Solutions has flavored and built it as a agricultural equipment / construction equipment format. So we understand products. We understand. I was at a software demo once, not too long ago, and this company asked about this and that, and we asked. I was on the dealership side, being at the dealership, and I asked about a drill, and the presenter wanted to know if that was a 12-volt or cordless.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we all looked at ourselves. It was a video call like this. We all looked around and said, okay, I don't know how far this is going to go. And of course, so we've got that flavor in there. This overall dealership and driven, Kirk, one of our key guys, he's a farmer, been around 15 years. And so when you pull up a drill in our system, it says disc drill, precision drill, hoe drill, we understand that market. So that's a big part of it. And so just to have a CRM, it's really a CRM with something more. It understands that process. So many softwares out there don't know how to handle a trade. They don't know what an over allowance is. So I was sat in another demonstrations, and the other software is more of a business mind, and so they just say, well, you'll just show the customer what you're booking the trade in for, right? That's what the deal is, and so not very many farmers want to hear what we're paying them for the trade in. They want to hear what we're allowing them for the trade in, and so that kind of flavors what builds it. So basically, our program, we're allowed to build using price books. We have 20-some price books, so that's pretty clean. We keep track of our customers. Everybody the managers get to see what the other salesmen are doing and what margins are expected and so on. And then so much of that can be done on the mobile app as well. So NetSuite has a mobile app. You could be leaving a customer's yard. Well, first you can hit the button, find his name, his phone number shows up, you hit that, it dials, you talk to him, you hang up, you hit log call, and you can do voice to text at the end of his lane where you're at the side of the road. Okay, this is what he said. Hit the button, it logs that in your system. So that's the beauty of the mobile side. You can grab quotes. If you have a tablet, you could build a quote on the side of the road. But for certainly people my age, trying to build a quote on my phone is a challenge. It's pretty small print, pretty small keyboard. So I wouldn't personally build a quote itself right from scratch at the side of the road on my phone, but I certainly would with a tablet. So we have that mobile app. We could be building a quote in the customer's kitchen and the milk barn, in the side of the truck, and the side of the road. Well, he's cutting some grain there. You can work on details and communicate with your manager. So have processes and flat rates in there. So it's a single point that can be mobile to do all your quoting and customer management for sure.
Right on. So let's talk about price books, and that's the one thing I think that you bring with your systems that a lot of other systems don't have access to, and that's the manufacturer's price books that you have. You said you had 20 price books. You cover all the major lines of manufacturers out there. Talk about that a little bit and that relationship that you have with those manufacturers.
For sure. And that's part of my role too, not only as a product specialist, but a third of my time is dedicated, which is somewhat new for us. I would like to point out that I'm a completely new resource for Randall Riley. I didn't replace anybody. That's kind of the commitment that Randall Riley's throwing behind this. There's lots of behind the scenes stuff that they're doing extra that we hadn't seen before, but I am one of the customer facing assets that is completely new. So I didn't replace anybody. I'm a new resource. So again, a significant commitment by Randall Riley. But so I work with the customer, the companies, and the interesting thing, I'll start with, lots of manufacturers have tried over the years, tried to make a configuration tool or a quoting tool. Lots of them. And I don't know of any that have been really successful. Some are there to be kind of forced to be used, and you have to use it. And some people like it in a single facet, but most dealers struggle with a quoting tool from the manufacturer because, one, they don't often allow you to price any other brands. So then if you have a configurator for one product and another product, let's say a MacDon header on a combine, unfortunately, some people might print the quote off the combine and print the quote for the MacDon and staple it together and hand it to the customer. No communication, no history of the pricing, no programs, no work orders, nothing, just kind of a pile of papers and you hand it on to the customer. So a lot of dealers struggle with that. They want communication. They want to see what's going on. They want it in one spot. Maybe they want to add a used MacDon header to a new combine. So with an independent quoting tool, CRM quoting tool, we have that advantage that we can say, we'll take your inventory and add it to the quote. We'll take a new combine and add it to your quote. We'll take a new MacDon header and add it to your quote. And so that's the beauty of, shall we say, an independent product speaking to multiple spots. And so with several of our manufacturers, one thing that I really like, and I think it makes the most sense, is that we link to their configurator. And so very simple, we're in the quoting tool. We start a quote like we would normal. And when we search for a source of where we want to get quote from, it's just a drop down and it's either inventory or manual or price books or configurator. And I'll start there with the configurator. And you hit configurator, sends you to a small window. You click the brand. You only have access for the brands that you have contract with. And as an example, let's say CNH. You click there and it takes you, with all the right permissions and securities, takes you to their configurator. And you actually build it in the same format as you would if you went there on their own, if you just went to their configurator without it. So all the rules are there. It's the most up-to-date pricing. It's their look and feel, their descriptions, their standard features all come across at the same time. And so you build it as you would normally, and then you hit import to quote. And all that information now is in your quote. All the costs, all the codes, even the codes that which a lot of people miss. If we're doing it manually, so many people only write down the ones that have dollars beside them. Certain size tires, this price, and aim control under sprayer, this price. And that's cool, except that coming from the inventory side, it would really tick me off when they would do that, because I couldn't decide which products were just yes, but no value, you know, or no product, no value. And so when we build it using a configurator, of course, it has all that information that's important to other people at the dealership. So we just grab those configurators, that information, and put it in a quote. Lo and behold, it's perfect. And actually, CNH, we just got the connection to be able to link to their order board. So not only is our relationship with Case IH as far as the price books, CNH with the price books, we're now going to have information on updating your order. So if you had a tractor on order in your inventory in HQ, because of course you build it there as soon as you order it, and you can price from there, you would hit a refresh button and it'll update the prices to the current price that Case IH is offering on that machine, which, as we all know, over the last 12 or 18 months, it has been a nightmare trying to keep up to date with what the new prices are. And so we're able to link there. So there's we have several configurators in there. Depending on how the configurator is built, there's the odd different step on how to get there, but we still get them into the quote and we link them across, and we're actively adding configurators. We have a very will be a huge plus for us on that list of configurators that we're just down to the paperwork on. Everybody's agreeable, and we hope to have another configurator built. And that's the nicest for us and nicest for our end user. The second nicest for our end user, but not as handy for us, but we do it, is that we'll add price books. So we'll take so we say a sort line price book. So we can take a short line price book and we add them in the system. And there's Macdon's one of them. Plains, Great Plains, different companies like that out there. We have them in there, and you're able to build them, and we add them with rules. So there's no danger that if you miss something, that like on a tractor, you get the right rear tires to the front tires. Things like that are all built in there. So it's just a click and point. There's rules in there. You have to hit the right items. If you don't have all the categories covered, doesn't let you go forward. And of course, that moves over with costs and price and details and all the standard features. It's just not as handy for us as a configurator, because that's a lot of work for us to update. But we will add almost any price book that we can have made available to us and add it in the system. And that's how our library's grown to a little over 20 price books. One of the most recent ones I had was Chrome. Working with the Chrome people, they would love that idea, because it also a very big benefit for the manufacturers, because now we have standard features and anything that may be reported to the guides. Okay. So that's a huge plus, right? So that was where
a big difference.
That's it makes big. Chrome's an example. We just had a meeting. Here's the price books. Oh, there's these standard features on some of their balers that we didn't have listed in the iron guides, but we wanted to give the most data we could. And so now we have the price books, so our team will add those standard features to the iron guides. So price books is an exclusive for sure. I think it's something we lean on. You know, the mistakes we have anymore, that there's no such thing as a cheap mistake ordering a sprayer these days. No. And
no, there's not. Yeah.
And so that's pretty handy, and it worked for the whole team down the line. And then of course that ties in with the iron guides as an exclusive within the quoting tool.
Right on. Okay. All right. Last question, and then we'll wrap it up. This is kind of one of the last, kind of ask some version of this question about everybody that comes on here. But as you take a look going through now through 23, and you're looking at availability of product, which isn't getting any better. I don't know. I can't say it's getting worse, but I sure can't say it's getting any better either. As you're looking at availability, and what you look in price books and you look at all the price increases and everything that's come into play, what's one of your biggest concerns, I guess, going into 23 as far as it comes to equipment right now?
Well, in 23, I'm not sure, but I do know that we're on the cusp of change. The pendulum is going to swing, and there's no doubt about that. The feeding frenzy, shall we say, the pent-up desire that eventually we're going to get filled, the production slots, the getting back online. I have a great deal of fear, and I've seen many waves. I was around in the late 70s when we were quoting customers retail plus, and we ticked off 2 customers at the time: the guy that got the tractor and the guy that didn't. Right. And because we just said, okay, it's so many dollars over retail. Have a good day. Take it or not. And And so that pendulum's going to come, and how that, all those pre-sale trades and all those high dollars we were predicting that were buying things a year out or 18 months out, the pendulum's going to swing.
Yep.
Count on it.
Yep. No doubt about that. And you watch what's happening now. And I've kind of said, as long as we have this backflow stuff coming out of the factory and what that looks like, and, keeping up with demand and those kind of things, we're going to have some level of shelter here. But the slamming of the final sledgehammer here that kind of knocks down that wall will be when everything does get full, and that initial the premium gets taken off of machinery that's available now, and what does that look like, and how does that affect a lot of things, not just the overall marketplace, but also balance sheets and those kind of things of guys on the farm. So tons of stuff
Holding that inventory.
Yeah.
Holding that inventory at the wrong time.
Yep.
It will be a problem. It's
a problem for sure. So, well, Randy, enjoyed the conversation. If folks want to reach out to you and get more information about Randall Riley and what you guys are offering there with RNHQ, what's the best way to do that?
Go to our webpage, ask for a demo. They can email me at randyty@randallriley.com. This is probably the easiest.
Right on. His last name is Tye, so make sure you spell like that. So, Randy, appreciate you being on the podcast, man. Look forward to seeing you here in about a week or so.
Sounds great.
All right. I'm Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Make sure you check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That's where you find the latest editions on Moving Iron Podcast. Also, go to MovingIronLLC.com for everything Moving Iron related. You can find me on LinkedIn at Moving Iron Podcast, and check out the Moving Iron Podcast YouTube channel, where you can see this very video version of this very podcast here. So with that, I am Casey Seymour with Randy Tye. Let's go do some iron, folks. Out.
Moving iron in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving iron time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here.